to it. All right, what's going on, everybody? This is Patrick from POWLAX, Patrick Chapla, and in today's live stream, we are going to be talking about solid foundations, whether that be in life, with relationships, in terms of lacrosse, and a bunch of other things that I'll basically just try to navigate through. I don't have many notes for today. We're going to start off with something new, which is a quote from a book that was recommended through John O'Grady's leadership talk, which I think will be fun. I think we might start like that every day as we go through this. So essentially what I'd like to do with today's live stream is build a understanding of why it's so important to be truthful, why it's so important to try to gain an understanding for all of what something is versus just what you've always thought, and to relate that into why it's so important to have a solid foundation within lacrosse, whether that be athleticism, whether that be anything else of the sort. So it should be a fun live stream. Hopefully I won't ramble too much, and hopefully we'll get out some pretty good lessons and things of that nature. So before we hop into everything, do a couple of announcements. First off, this podcast / live stream is brought to you by the POWLAX Patreon. On the POWLAX Patreon, you can get access to all of the PDFs that I have created that reference all of the videos that I have on YouTube. So basically, any video I have on YouTube, pretty much anyone, there is also a corresponding PDF that you can print out and add to your playbook by becoming a patron. And essentially, the Patreon is just to help support me as I continue to create lacrosse content. And I'm very excited to say that I got to film yesterday and the day before, because when I filmed the day before, I didn't have the correct lighting and it looked awful. So now for my second set of filming, I think the video came out better. But so there's going to be a new video coming out here in the next week. I'm excited for it. It's one that I've actually been waiting to do for a while, that I think because of how people like to watch offensive videos, that's the one that's going to really help. But so if you want to help support me as I create lacrosse content, you can do that at patreon.com/POWLAX and get access to basically my entire playbook. So that's that. Next, if you'd like to buy lacrosse balls, you can get them at pearllacrosse.com. Use code POWLAX and you'll get 10% off. Also, you can do that at flipgoalie.com, and that's it. Actually, we'll do one more. Also, if you'd like to buy some POWLAX swag, you can get POWLAX shirts, whether they're the small logo. I'm excited to have the small logo one. I actually just ordered one for myself. Actually, someone ordered like 4 or 5 stickers, and that gave me access to get a free shirt. So I got a free one of my own shirts, which I thought was very cool, and I'm excited to wear it. It's going to be baby blue, and it's going to have a white POWLAX logo on it, so I'm stoked for that. So that is, I want to say it's teespring.com/store/POWLAX store. I don't know, but you can find it on www.powlax.com. So those are all of the announcements, and to lead off today, we are going to be reading today's entry in the Daily Stoic. So this was a book that was recommended to me by, I'm not sure if it was John O'Grady or someone who was it might have also been Coach Alberici from Army, but this is essentially a daily book of quotes and meditations from the Stoics. And the Stoics were, let's see if I can get this right. This is something I tried to make sure I read this morning, but didn't get time to do it. The Stoics were basically people who thought about the way you'd want to live your life. So I want to say this could also apply to what's the name of that mode of thought? I'm not sure. Either way, I'm a fan of books like these where you get one thing per day to think on, because it really solidifies how you start your day, and when they're really good, they're awesome. But so I also have a couple books. One of them is the Cherokee Feast of Days, and that one has more of a Native American sense to it, but so that one's pretty cool. And then, so now we're just going to read today's entry, and I like today's entry for what we're going to talk about. I'm going to move YouTube, and then I'm going to see. Okay. No, I do not know who Connor Kelly, or I know who Connor Kelly is. That's cool that he's your neighbor. That's cool. Oh, sorry, last little thing. Sorry, I'm bouncing all over the place. But today is also brought to you by Vintage Lacrosse. So Vintage is run by a guy named Ryan Thayer, and he basically trades in all of the vintage lacrosse gear. And so I recommend hitting him up and finding his pages on LinkedIn and Facebook and TikTok, and helping support him, because what he does is pretty cool. He just finds a bunch of the old lacrosse stuff, and if you ever want one, you can hit him up, and he basically just trades in those things. And I wanted to shout him out because we traded shirts and stickers, and I hadn't worn the shirt in a video yet, so I figured I would shout him out as I wore the shirt. So hit him up for sure. So for our daily Stoic quote: every habit and capability is confirmed and grows in its corresponding actions, walking by walking and running by running. Therefore, if you want to do something, make a habit of it. If you don't want to do that, don't, but make a habit of something else instead. The same principle is at work in our state of mind. When you get angry, you've not only experienced that evil, but you've also reinforced a bad habit, adding fuel to the fire. Epictetus, Discourses 2.18.1-5. And so then they have basically what they do in the book is then they kind of talk about it. And what's funny about this quote is that they actually quote Marcus Aurelius and Aristotle. So the Aristotle quote is, "We are what we repeatedly do, therefore excellence is not an act but a habit." And Marcus Aurelius's is, "Such as are your habitual thoughts, such also will be the character of your mind." And so they also reference some other things that they ask and or that they kind of define, but I really like this. And so the goal within, I guess, this segment at the beginning of these live streams and podcasts is to explain how I feel that relates to myself, because I think that, a quote is a quote, but real life things are more valid. They're just more entertaining. But so when I think about my own habits and what I do, the one thing that gets me into my day correctly is working out. So I do my bike ride in the morning, and the only way that I've been able to do my bike ride is I used to read. So I used to just read on the bike, and that was one way that really helped me to do that well. It wasn't really do it well, but it was something that would get me onto it. Like I would enjoy getting onto the bike in the morning, because it would allow me to then read the next portion of whatever book I was reading. Now, what's been happening recently is I use the morning bike ride on my stationary bike to put out a post. And a post, here's what I do. I go to my own YouTube, I screen record from my YouTube, and I then edit and post in InShot, and I post it all over, right? So I get 5 posts per day at least. So I get an Instagram, a TikTok, a LinkedIn, a Twitter, and a Facebook post every single day. And so with those 5 things, I'm at least contributing something into, to the world within that point in time, which, because I've made it habitual, the only day I missed was Mother's Day, but we had a great Mother's Day. It was awesome. I'll talk about that in a minute. But because it's become a habit and I enjoy doing it, it's definitely helped me to contribute more to my online presence, which has been cool. But so I think the key reference within the idea of making habits is definitely, if you don't want to do that, don't, but make it a habit of something else instead. And so habits have definitely trapped me in the past. So one of them was definitely drinking back when I drank. So that was like 4.5 years ago. And what I noticed was that as I was, any day I hit the store, King Soopers, I would always hit the liquor store, and I would buy a 6-pack. I would drink it over the course of the next 2 days. And then when the weekend hit and I was able to not worry about waking up the next morning and I could kind of sleep in, then I would drink way too much. I would stay out way too late. And by the end of by Monday, I was completely unable to remember where I had left off on Friday. And so it totally crushed what I was doing. And so all of the POWLAX Master Coach stuff started after I quit drinking, which was unbelievable. Like I'm still a little bit in shock as far as how much content I've put out. I look back on it and it's a cool thing to see back when I had the idea to put out all the content now through to now, and to kind of see how people have responded to it. But the point being is, within reference to that quote through the Daily Stoics is when the Broncos won the Super Bowl and I got drunk for that last time, the next day I didn't tell anyone anything that I was doing. I just went to the bar like we always did. And instead I said, no, I'm good. I don't want to have this, I don't want a beer. I don't want a shot. I'm good. And then after 30 days, I basically started letting people know that I hadn't had a drink for 30 days. And then that became the habit of just being able to say, no, I think I'm good. And what's funny is that a couple people actually were really trying to, come on, man, you can have a shot, like whatever. And it was interesting to see people who they feel that everything is attached to that drink or to that, I don't know, hit of your pipe or whatever you want to say. But really, none of it is attached to that thing. Like it may, it'll inebriate you a little bit, but in the same sense, it's not controlling whether or not I could have fun and enjoy my time. And what's funny is I enjoy my time way more now that I don't. And I don't think, I remember thinking at 2 years of not drinking how crazy it would be to hit 5. And now I'm, 10 months from 5, and it's a very kind of cool thing. But so within the idea of creating new habits, I think that it's a lot about trying and failing. So also with smoking cigarettes and vaping, I had to try to quit at each thing probably 30 times prior to actually being able to just let it go. And of course, having my son helped me to, when Turner was born, I was still vaping, and I would vape in the house. And I would kind of go to the window, or I would go to the door, and I would do it, and I would then blow it outside. And it was, kind of whatever that was. But over time, it wasn't necessarily guilt, but it was a little bit of guilt. But then one day I decided to do the patches. The patches worked, and I realized at the end of the step downs from the patches that on that day was going to be the easiest day for me to stop. And I didn't really have to do anything new. I just was able to let it go at that point. But the patches really did help me to get through the days. And so I'll explain that in a sense, because I think if anyone does smoke, it will help them. The key to the patches is the idea that the nicotine that spikes in your blood doesn't have that ability to spike. So the patches allow it to stay consistent all day. And as the nicotine stays consistent all day, you don't get that up and down, that feeling of needing to go smoke a cigarette or to vape. And so because you stay consistent all day, you kind of feel that wanting, but it's not enough to really make you, because you haven't had the spike. So over the course of the first 4 weeks, you get used to not having that thing all day. And then you do a step down for the next 2 weeks and a step down for the next 2 weeks. I actually only did 2 weeks with the first step too. And then at the end of that last day, you realize that this is going to be the easiest. It's going to be the easiest time for you to stop. That's what I realized, is that it was going to be the easiest time for me to stop it all. And that was, it allowed me to stop, which is cool. And I never looked back. It's funny. I played in a poker game for the Gaethje fight. And what I noticed was as people came in and they had smoked outside, man, it just reeked. It was not cool. But so either way, that's my smoking story and how habitually certain habits have really kind of trapped me in the past. But now, I still have habits. Like when I know there's something that I need to do administratively, I usually put it off for a couple of weeks, and that I probably shouldn't do that. But so now we're going to get into the idea of solid foundations. And the reason that this came to mind was because of some of the things that are happening online and the how to put this. There are items in the press and in the news that have a very tribal feel to them. And it's kind of been what's happened since, Trump got elected. Everything's gotten more tribal. And I'm not going to talk about the specific case because I did see a very good video on this case yesterday that really outlined kind of his thoughts very well. But the thing that I notice is that the most important aspect of having a conversation about anything that's going on in the world is that you build the base of what you understand about that specific instance as much as you can prior to giving what you think. And so what's happening now is people try to take the easy way out of whatever circumstance they have, right? So instead of trying to evaluate something in its whole, they will neglect a complete side of what's going on and choose what they want to choose based on what they've always heard. So I was this person coming out of college, and I was in a very left city in Boulder, and I never questioned anything about what was going on or any of this. And I realized after my brother mentioned something that I should probably look into everything as a whole rather than just get certain sides. But so the key in the way that comes back to the foundations element is the reason people don't do it is because it's hard, right? It's tough to go and look into things that are against what you naturally think, but that's so important. And so I'm going to give an analogy to the drinking that I just referenced and the smoking. Well, not the smoking, it's really just the drinking. And I'm also going to give a reference to, I forget what the second one was, but we'll start with the drinking one. So back when I was drinking, like I mentioned, I'd get a 6-pack whenever I went to the store, and I would just have 3 beers a night. And then when I got to the end of the weekend, we would always get, we would get so drunk. I would get so drunk that on Monday or whenever I started working again, I couldn't remember where I was in the work. And so I would have to figure out where I was before I could start work again. After I stopped drinking, that never happened. But so what it was like crawling. If you think about the difference between driving on a highway that's flat and you can build up speed, and then driving up a mountain, which if you think of, I don't know what they call it rock crawling, right? The reference that I'm trying to make is, imagine if the highway had a big pothole. So every day is, say, 10 yards on the highway. If everything is flat and you don't drink to the point of not being able to think through what you did the day previously, you're able to build up speed and momentum, and you can consistently, like once you get up to speed, you can kind of just cruise. And if you need to slow down and speed up, it becomes relatively easy. But if every 10 yards or so, there's a big pothole, you're never going to be able to get up to speed. And so the key thing that was hindering me in that sense was I didn't have a foundation of what each day kind of should be or how I would want to live each day. And the foundation of, I was eroding my own mentality every day that I went and got too drunk. And so the way that relates, and that's the idea as far as the drinking was. But so the other aspect that really hit me in that time was my relationships, right? Because even though being drunk was fun at times, it also didn't allow me to control certain aspects of who I wanted to be when I was drunk, right? So I was kind of, I wasn't always a mean drunk, but there were times when I couldn't control my temper as I was drinking, and that would then erode the foundations of our relationship. So as far as the idea of a foundation goes, I'm now going to build that out into the ideas of life and then into lacrosse. And we're going to do, which one should I pick? Which one should I do first? That's the question. Lacrosse or life? I think we'll do lacrosse first because it's a lacrosse channel and that's what we're doing, right? Okay, so in lacrosse, if you think about how a football player who is very good at football, who's just an athlete, can come into the game, you recognize how good their foundation is athletically, right? So you think basketball players, you think soccer players, you think football players, right? If they're an athlete, they can immediately step on the field and move their body in ways that players who are not as athletic can't, right? And so as we consider that, their athletic foundation is stronger than someone who is less athletic than they are. And that can be, that can be genetic. That can also be just what they've worked on, right? Now, the key thing about lacrosse that's most difficult for those players is that the ability to handle and control a ball within a stick is its own foundation as well. So those athletic players don't always pan out to be the best players. Like if you're going to be at the elite, you have to be unbelievably athletic, and you have to be, unbelievably skilled with your lacrosse stick, right? But so in order to do the best you can to build the players that you would like to build, the thing that you have to do is you have to build both of those foundations. You have to build the foundation of stick skills. You have to build the foundation of that athleticism. And once you've done the basics in the stick skills, you also have if you put that person into any situation, they will be able to utilize both of those skills in order to do whatever they need to do well. And so I think that's the key to the foundation argument, or not argument, but that's the key to the idea of building a foundation, is that whether it's life or lacrosse, you want to be able to function well in whatever situation you are put in. And for the most part, we don't build, well, not for the most part, we don't build, but in a lot of situations, we are not building ourselves and each other to incorporate a foundation that allows us to be useful and to succeed in any avenue, right? So you look at me, well, I don't want to bring in that aspect too, but so we'll move on to the idea of life. So one of my all-time favorite analogies that Dr. Jordan Peterson uses is when he talks about, okay, I didn't even talk about this aspect, which is how I was trying to lead in the entire time. And that's why we do this, so I can kind of reference exactly how I wanted to build the argument. So has everybody seen the movie Volcano with Tommy Lee Jones? It's about basically a volcano that comes up in LA. And so the idea is a volcano is coming out of the middle of the city because LA was built on a fault line, right? And in the movie, Tommy Lee Jones says it was a foolish man who built his house upon the sand, which is a reference to a part of Matthew in the Bible, right? And in that moment when I was younger, I understood what he meant so much. And so this obviously ties into the idea of creating a good foundation, because if you build your house on something on the sand and the sand erodes, your house isn't going to be functional because of what you did. And so in that moment, I had an understanding of the idea of that quote as far as make sure your foundation is what you want it to be when building or when doing something. What I didn't have an understanding of is how that relates then back to the idea of relationships and how you want to live your life. So we're going to go through, I'm going to do two references of Dr. Jordan Peterson's, I don't know what I would even call it, of his teachings. And I'm going to try and go through them as succinctly as I can. So first, in your relationships with people, I'm going to tell a story. So this is something that I actually bought Turner, and I've read it to him, I want to say 2 or 3 times, and I plan on reading it to him as he grows. But so it's a story about a dragon, and it's called The Bixby's and a Dragon or something. But so basically in this story, Billy Bixby, who is the kid, wakes up one morning and he sees this dragon sitting in his room, and it's, about the size of a cat. And he asks his mom, Mom, check this dragon out. And his mom goes, oh, there's no such thing as dragons. And so he's like, all right, okay, whatever. And so then the dragon grows. And as the dragon is growing, it becomes the size of, a decent sized dog. And it steals his breakfast, right? It steals his pancakes. And so he's like, Mom, the dragon's stealing my pancakes. And she's like, there's no such things as dragons. And so then the dragon continues to grow. And as it continues to grow, the mom is avoiding it as she's cleaning the house. And, Billy's looking at it like, can't talk to mom about it anymore, because if it doesn't exist, there's no reason for me to talk about this thing. And then the dragon gets so big that its arms and legs go out the windows and the doors of the house, and it runs off, right? And then the Bixby's dad gets home and realizes that his entire house is gone. And the whole idea of the story is about the analogy of this dragon being a problem and the mom not being able to face this problem. And so at the end, the dragon shrinks back down once they acknowledge that the problem exists. And so the way this comes into the foundation and the way Dr. Jordan Peterson explains it is he's like, have you ever heard of a situation where someone comes home and their entire house is gone? And you know that because, infidelity is that thing, because it will completely erode the past, present, and future of that situation, right? When someone, so say there is a relationship that has lasted, 5-6 years, and one of the people cheats on the other, there is a perception that the person who got cheated on has prior to figuring that out, right? Prior to understanding that. The past has this trust to it, the present has this comfort to it, and the future is, I trust this person, we're going to move through our lives together, right? But once they understand and see that the other person hasn't been faithful, it ruins the past, because what they thought was this mutual relationship has now been completely, destroyed. And the present situation sucks because now you're interacting with this person who betrayed you. And the future is no longer there because now you have this person who totally betrayed you. Why would you want to continue on into the future with it? So in that moment, and in the story of the Bixby's, the dragon is a problem that everyone ignores because it's not there. But so the idea of foundations in relationships is the idea of really kind of getting to the truth of who people really are. And we talked about this a little bit last week about the idea of integrating your shadow, or bringing the things that you don't like about yourself to the forefront of your identity, because those are, because in a sense, we all are what we are in this current moment, and there's no really changing what that is. Now, if you want to make an act on who you can become, you can do that through time, but there's no sense really feeling positive or negative about where you're at. I guess every thought is a reference to the past about who you could be and what you've done in the past, which then gives you a reference to who you might want to be in the future, which lets you then do it. But so if in that analogy, you think through where you want to be, the person, hold on, I got to get back through exactly how I want to attain this. So in the example of the relationship, the person who was not being faithful allowed the other person to have an understanding of their relationship that was not true. And it was then built upon was essentially, sorry, I'm getting distracted by the comments because so Coach Garland was hoping for some drills. This isn't the thing for drills. This is the thing for me to explain through ideas and how things reference through life lessons and things. But so the whole idea is now I'm all off track. Let me look through what I wrote down, which I usually don't really have any notes. So we've got through the idea of relationships. So the idea of having a solid foundation. And so I think the ultimate point that I want to get to is the idea of truth and it was another quote. So hold on. I'm going to read another quote from this because I think it was the first quote that we read. So Seneca said in Moral Letters 105.7, the greatest portion of peace of mind is doing nothing wrong. Those who lack self-control live disoriented and disturbed lives. So basically, in the idea of living your truth, you then smooth out whatever actions you're going to take in your life, right? So the problem with lying, and the thing I've never been able to lie, it like hits me, and I feel like most people have that too. If you lie and you try to deceive people, I feel like everyone feels that. And so it's just like when you're running, when you're sprinting around a field, if you're doing sprints or whatnot, if you're taking time off, you're taking that time off, and it's not something that someone else really needs to check up on. But once you can call people out on it, the question is whether or not they care. And ultimately they may or may not care, but it's not really for you to judge. And that's the part where POWLAX comes in for me, is I don't really care to be the person or the I don't really care to be the tip top. I care that when people are interacting with me, that they enjoy the time and that I'm truthful in what that is. So, okay. I got to think through my ideas. But so the idea is that by building a foundation of understanding, you are then able to be truthful in what you do. So the way that this relates back to what's happening in the world right now is I see all of these people who are like my friends from college and past parts of my life who I trust, who are saying things online that are unbelievably false because of it is purposefully misrepresented, unless it's just completely naive. But the things are false because they're framing it in a way, framing certain things in a way that are incomplete in their foundation, right? So if you think about a tripod, the reason a tripod works is it has three legs that all go in the same spot. So, or not in the same spot, that all pick up a portion of the head of the tripod. Now, if you get rid of one of those, it becomes much harder to stand. And that's basically what happens within these arguments that people make online, is they don't have to reference things. And the trouble with online is that it takes a lot of time and effort to build out an entire argument, because most things are not black and white. There's a lot of gray. And one of the hardest things to do is to navigate through a situation. So I'm pretty sure everyone's heard of the situation. Okay, apparently YouTube is glitching out right now. So let me just make sure I can allow it to do better. Oh, there we go. Back to excellent. Perfect. So there's a case happening right now that everybody's talking about. A tragic, awful thing happened. And now we're back to it not working well. Okay. And what I notice is that people are making leaps of faith on what one thing was versus another. And the trouble of it is, in a world where only half of what is being told to you is, well, where you're only being told half the story, it's extremely difficult to navigate through that situation. It's just like the relationship idea, where if someone's being cheated on and they don't know about it, it's going to be completely impossible for the person who is being cheated on to have a direct reference to how they should live their lives, because they don't know that the deceit is happening. And so if you think about you can do this in anything, and the foundation goes through all parts of life. If you don't have all the information, you don't have the ability to make a good enough assessment. Now, sometimes you have to make a decision without having all of the information, and sometimes things are leaps of faith. But overall, if you can build out a foundation and get a basic understanding of everything that you might know in that situation, that will be the best way to make a really good decision. Okay. YouTube is not functioning well, so I'm going to hop off the YouTube for a second and see if I can't get back into it. It shouldn't take me too long. It might actually not even stop streaming, but we'll kind of see how that goes. So I'm going to stop. Sorry, hold on. YouTube wasn't back again. I do apologize. Sometimes this happens. It's tough to be running. I think my internet doesn't like running all three at once, so sometimes it screws up, but we'll kind of see. So hopefully YouTube is back. Hopefully the people from YouTube are, they can navigate back in, and hopefully I get something where I can actually put this on the podcast. I should probably do the recording at the same time too. So I'm going to try to do as I always do. I'm going to try to navigate through the ideas that I want to get out in as succinct of manner as possible. Okay. So the idea of having a solid foundation, whether it be within a mode of thinking like mathematics, in school, we always learn mathematics. And once you have a base understanding of how things work, you can then progress as you go. But without the base understanding, you can't really navigate through the upper levels of what that is. Now, same goes for lacrosse. Within lacrosse, if you don't have a base foundation of stick skills, no athleticism in the world is going to allow you to play the game well. And then if you're the most athletic person in the world, but you can't carry and handle a ball, it's not going to really matter. Now, those things can be traded here and there within those avenues. But the idea is that in order to be successful in any part of life, and in order to get the correct answer, you have to have a good amount of foundation built in order to live well and rightly in the world. So, all right, Noah 66966, what's going on, man? And then, yes, I will show you the setup once we get done with my complete understanding. So for those of you who've never been on this live stream, and everyone who's been on this live stream before knows that this is really about me trying to navigate through thoughts I have, because speaking them is a lot different than thinking them, because thinking them, you can kind of go which way you want. And a lot of those gaps don't make sense. And so when I try to speak through them, I notice a lot that as I'm speaking, I miss all of the important aspects of what things are. So then at the end, I try to navigate through it relatively easily, or not easily, quickly, to allow for better understanding. So, in relationships, if your foundations are not built on solid ground, it's something where someone may be deceptive, someone else may be, maybe the thing that you thought someone appreciated isn't the thing that they did, and therefore that relationship can kind of be stressed. And another thing from the Jordan Peterson aspect is not to neglect those habits like we heard about in the Stoic at the very beginning of the podcast, because when you think about the little parts of a day, like how you greet your parents when you come home, or how, you greet your wife when you walk home, or what you do in a moment where you're trying to get work done and your son is screaming his head off at you. If you can get those moments right, because they happen all the time. I'm not saying Turner screams his head off all the time, but the other things happen all of the time, right? Like I remember back when I was in high school and I would come home from practice and I would still be all super jazzed up and excited about what happened and practice was awesome. And my mom would have to go, hey, you're not at practice anymore. Calm down. And the ability to master that transition allows for a good relationship to happen, because each one of those moments becomes a better moment. And so when you think about times like when you walk in the door, how do you want to be greeted? How do you want to greet the people who are important to you? Do you want to greet them with a smile? If you do, then in the car, when you're about to go into the house, you need to think through the idea of who you're going to be in that moment. Because if you come in, guns blazing, all crazy, and you interrupt the person in what they're doing, they're going to get that emotional reaction of not having a good, it's not going to be a good reaction. And when you think about how many times that happens in a week, I think I probably greet my wife 3-4 times a day, at least 3-4 times a day. And we interact in those moments on subtle occasions for X amount of time. If I'm not in the right headspace in those moments, that means I'm having a bad time for 45 minutes per day, and 45 minutes per day adds up to, let's just call it an hour, 7 hours per week. And then 7 times 52 is going to be 3,500 hours per year. That's awful. If you can get those little parts of your day right on solid foundations where you know how you're going to be doing that, your life is going to be way better than you think it is, because all those little moments that people think don't matter are the most important thing that you have. Now, we've talked through kind of the relationship idea. Now I want to talk through... So we talked about lax, we talked about relationships. Now I want to talk through the idea of information in today's day and age. So I think it's very important to have people that you trust that think different things than you do. Because if you don't have people that you trust, so let's take this example. If everyone in the world was given a... what do you call it? What's that? What do you call the thing that highlights the people in The Sims? It's like a diamond. Is that what you'd call it? But so if everyone had a little thing on the top of their head that told people what they think about any certain thing, I think what you would notice is that people would go into one of two ways. First, they would avoid people who had the opposite thought on certain things than they do at first, right? But then if it happened all at once, what you would see is that certain people have different understandings based on, even though they trust those people. So what happened for me is my brother mentioned something that allowed me to think, well, why does he think that? I trust him. Like, I would trust this guy with my life. Like, he's my brother. And he mentioned something, and I was like, man, I got to look into that then, because if he thinks this way, that would allow me to kind of like think through why he thought that. And that's the issue with this case that's going on, is the fact that the way it's being represented in the media is that they're representing one side or the other side like they are the bad guy, and that they are completely beyond reproach, like completely remorseful. Not remorseful is probably not the right word, but it's really frustrating to watch, because then you see people who you know and who you trust come back and say things that they never would say, because they're not being told the whole argument, not being told the whole thing. And so those people don't have a good foundation in what their argument is. And because they don't, it doesn't allow them to, because their foundation is faulty. Like, you get why they think what they think, because you can see it happening in real time, because you understand that they're not given the final piece of the puzzle, or not even the final piece of the puzzle. They're not given a piece of the puzzle that you see. Like, so, okay. That's why when I heard my brother say whatever he said, and I'm not going to get into all the, like, what that was and all of that, because I don't have time to explain through why my thoughts are now what they are. And I don't think it's necessary for what this is. But once I started to build out and trying to figure out what everyone thought around all of these issues, it allowed me to better assess where I actually was, right? So let's see. Let's say in lacrosse. So let's talk about this issue. Do you think that players should play up or down when they're growing up? It's a good question. Do you think that the stratification of what teams are best in a certain age group is a good thing or a bad thing? Right? So let's give an example. First off, if you can play up, play up. If you can play down, don't play down. Always play with your age group. Now, hopefully you have enough players in that age group that you can have multiple teams where you might be on the not best team, but don't ever play down. You want to see where you are at with your own age group at all times, at least, or the people who are older than you. Now, every single, and I've talked about this in the past, every single tournament where all teams in the country are not participating, and teams are stratified by certain levels, create false championships, right? So you take Denver Elite here. They are an exquisitely run program. Unbelievable coaches, Matt Brown, Trevor Tierney, Bill Tierney, Jamie, like, they're just, the way that they run their program is excellent. And another thing I think is really cool is that they allow the players to play at Peter Barton Stadium, which is and was the very first lacrosse only facility in the country. And when they play in Colorado, their silver teams, their best teams, they do unbelievably well and they win all these tournaments. Now, when they go out east to play Team 91 Crush from Long Island, a lot of times they get smashed. But so when you put yourself in an environment where you are not the best team, so when you put yourself in an environment where you are not the best, or where the best are not there, you get a false sense of being the best, right? And it's a really good thing, actually, because it doesn't necessarily matter that you're the best. But if you win, you do get that boost of feeling good about yourself and feeling good about who you are. Now, once you step up a level, you're going to see that you were in a false environment prior. So like you think about college lacrosse. And so one of the things that I tell all the players that I coach is that if you want to play in college, there's a place for you. Now, whether that's going to have the major you want to do or whatnot, if you're going to put in the work and you're going to do what you need to do, you're going to be able to play college lacrosse, whether that's MCLA, whether that's Division III, whether that's NAIA. You're probably, a lot of players aren't going to be that Division I top tier talent, but I never wanted that anyway. I wanted to enjoy my time in college and how all of that was happening, or not how it was happening. I wanted to enjoy my time and playing lacrosse, not have lacrosse be my entire life with it filling up every single day, all day. Now, the key to that is if you can't be honest with yourself and have an understanding for exactly where you are setting yourself up for failure and to fall from whatever foundation it is you think you have, right? In the same way it was a foolish man who built his house upon the sand and that his house is going to crumble because the sand is going to erode beneath him. It's the same when you lie to yourself about how good you are or where you are. And so as it comes to having a foundation in life, the most important thing you can do is be truthful, because if you're truthful about where you are, it gives you the ability to know which direction that you want to go. Whereas if you lie to yourself about who you are, you then have no idea where you are and therefore have no reference to not only where you are, but you might know where you want to go. But if you don't know where you are, you have no idea which direction you need to move in. And so I think the thing that plagues a lot of people is this, like we talked about last week, is the idea of people know the worst parts of themselves. And if you know the worst parts of yourself, sometimes you don't have that, you don't have the positivity to push through knowing all of the worst of what you are. And that is the biggest fallacy, because wherever you are, and this is something that my dad told me all the time, no matter where you are, someone else has been there. Hands down, best advice I ever got, because it allowed me to understand that me as myself is perfect in how I am and where I am. And because of that, it allowed me to move in the direction that I wanted to move in. Now, it's funny. When you think about maths of the world, this is just a funny story about why I ended playing soccer. You know how in soccer people flop and they like grab their leg like they're in super pain, then they get up? Well, I thought that was for real when I was growing up playing soccer. Like, for real. I thought it was for real. So I'm thinking that all these people are breaking their legs like every game playing soccer. And it made me hesitant to play soccer because I would not go in on balls as well as I could have, because I thought I was going to get hurt like the players were acting like they got hurt. And so it was this false representation. I don't know if it has anything to do with this idea of having a solid foundation, but it's just kind of a funny anecdote that I have. All right. So in final, the reason that you want to have, not the reason, it is important to build a solid foundation in anything that you do. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to take that wasn't the right way to phrase that. All right, let me get my reminder sheet up and then come right back to my streaming software so it doesn't go back again. So the idea of building a solid foundation was brought to me through what everyone was posting online, because you could totally tell that certain people hadn't built out their 3 legs of the tripod in their foundation. They were missing certain aspects of what their understanding should have been or could have been, and they were missing information. Therefore, what they were saying seems to have this error, not arrogance, seemed to have a mistake in it. You can understand where they're coming from because you understand what part of the argument they're missing. And I think it's important that when we are working with each other, we accept the idea that certain people aren't going to have the foundational knowledge that we have and not judge them for that. Within that non-judgment stage, it is also important that you not judge yourself, because in this moment, you are exactly who you are and there's no going in to change that. Now, that does mean that you can take specific actions in who you would like to be. And the most important aspect of that, I feel, is to build out your understanding or your relationships with as much truth and as much knowledge as you possibly can. Because in a relationship sense, you don't want to be acting on someone's deceit. And if someone asked me in one of these live streams, I believe it was on TikTok, whether or not they should tell the girl that liked them that they didn't like the girl. Of course you should. Absolutely 100%. Because if not, you are going to be giving her a false representation of your feelings towards her. And once you start to lie through that, her ability to make correct action is incorrect, right? So if you don't like her the way that she thinks you do, she is then going to attach to you and not go look for someone else to have that relationship with. And so those moments of deceit are where we end up missing each other. And in order to have a solid foundation within your relationship, you have to be truthful, because if that deceit comes in, they are not going to be operating on the same principles that they would if they knew what was actually true. And so in lacrosse, it is a key to have a good foundation. And so what I noticed in lacrosse, especially with coaches, is that coaches who don't have a solid foundation in how the game works end up saying things that they think should have a specific, they think what they say should have a specific reaction in the players, right? Make sure you got your stick on your collarbone, but maybe that kid doesn't know what collarbone is. And because they don't have a good understanding of the game, what they say isn't what the player actually needs to hear in order to do the thing that the coach wants. They get frustrated, and that's where that solid foundation is not there as in the coaching element. Then within the idea of, for players, having a solid foundation within the idea of lacrosse means that they have a decent amount of athleticism, which is multi-sport, as well as a decent ability to control the ball, so that if they're put into any situation within the game, they have the ability to succeed in that area, right? They have enough skill that when they are put into a situation, they have a, let's go with like a 60% chance of doing whatever that is. Now, in order to build your foundation, you obviously have to practice, and at any point in time, it is never a bad thing to acknowledge what the bad thing is. Okay, I think I did that relatively well. I probably didn't. The fact that many people actually stay on this whole time and listen to me ramble is crazy to me, but I do appreciate all of you watching. So I'm going to do the outro stuff, and then we're going to answer all the questions on TikTok, even though there are only 2 more people on TikTok. We got 5 still on Instagram and 1 on YouTube. So here we go. So what's your wow comment? How do I say that? Oh, Sam ain't my man. Is that what it is? I was like, Sam ain't? I'm glad. That's good, because thinking about a lot is it's a wonderful thing, because if you don't take the time to actually kind of get out of the rat race of stuff, you just end up, you're going to have a bad time. You kind of got to pull yourself out of things sometimes and think through them. So I'm glad that you're thinking about some things. Okay, so announcements first. If you like what I do for POWLAX, whether that be on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and you like the coaching side, or you like the kind of fun players type side, you can help support what I do by becoming a patron on Patreon for $5. For $5, you get access to all of the playbook PDFs that correspond to all of the videos on YouTube. Now, the important thing about this is that as you help to support, you get access to all that. You can print them out and you can just have them forever, really. But so the idea is that you're helping support new content through time. I really appreciate everyone who has been a patron. I think we almost hit 500. And then as the season got canceled, it dropped to like 412 or something like that. But it's been very awesome to have that in this time. So very thankful for that. Next, if you'd like to, Pearl Lacrosse Balls, are the best balls. It's funny. I see these ads for these ball scratchers and I'm like, why would you just not buy pearls and not have to deal with it? Because they're not that much more expensive. And once you start doing them, it's just easy. But so if you want to buy the best balls in the business, use code POWLAX at ProLacrosse.com and you'll get 10% off of your order. Next, if you want a nice goalie while you're shooting around, definitely look up Flip Goalie, flipgoalie.com. Use code POWLAX. You get 10% off your order there as well. Now, finally, if you like what I do and you want to support as well, but you don't want to just like donate money, right? Which is, just supporting all the free content that I make. You can also buy swag from Teespring. Now, in my opinion, the Teespring swag is way overpriced because I usually buy things in bulk, but I'm not a distributor. And so I have a whole closet full of stuff that's from years and years ago that doesn't sell. But so it's definitely overpriced, but it does kick back some. And so you help support POWLAX. And so that is, you go to www.powlax.com, click store, and it'll be the second link. Cool. Now, if anybody has questions, we're going to do a nice Q&A session. So we've got a couple people on, and I'm going to look through. If you are still on TikTok, either rewrite your question or just write something so I can go through and make sure that I'm not answering questions for people who are not here. Same thing goes for Instagram and YouTube. Let's see on YouTube. Still at 1. Okay, perfect. So I coach a second-year club program and thought that line of thinking made a lot of sense. I'm glad it made a lot of sense because hopefully it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense in my head, but I feel that as I ramble, sometimes I get off track, but I try to bring it all back together. I think it's important that people, like, one of the biggest things that I notice people have trouble with is a feeling of judgment based on what they think without the understanding that everyone is always changing, right? We're always on this climb. And because if you don't, so here's the thing. We're all in this space and time that we have right now, and not moving is a decision and it is action. If you don't move, you die. So you have to move forward. Now, the way in which you move forward is the key. And in order to understand how you move forward, you can't really have a bunch of like fret in how that is. But so, okay. So Instagram is going to cut out in about a minute and a half. When it does, I will restart one and we will do a nice Q&A. Let's see. It's interesting that there's a level of people who really want the drills and things because drills are on YouTube. This is just something different. I could go over the same drills over and over again, but I don't think that would be very entertaining. And so, okay, hold on. Before, favorite online stores for lacrosse gear. Don't really care. I like the ones that have everything for cheap that's like 3 years old because all the new stuff is just the same stuff but repackaged. And now we're not receiving data on YouTube again, so it's gonna make the podcast probably sound really bad. I need to start recording this too. Take my videos on POWLAX or on YouTube.com/POWLAX. All of those videos, I explain the same things over and over in different videos so that each video can stand on by itself, and that is the foundation for that video. Whereas if you create content that relies on other content, some people's ability to reference that content isn't going to happen. So, what is this? Your average white boys has been doing. Can you do some deep hole stuff? What kind of deep hole stuff are you thinking about? Start doing things with a deep hole. Ethan, are you still here? Ethan Baria. Goalies do get enough credit if they're on good teams and if they have coaches that acknowledge who they are and that they're good. All right, we're going to start this Instagram over. It's going to end in 3, 2, 1. Share to story. So, drills for defense. If you would like drills for defense, go to Kyle Hartzell's Instagram or Ryan Dunn's Instagram and just look back through their videos and just go through and just replicate what they do. So I think Ryan's Run the Rails drill is there. That's a really good one. I think that, if I was going to do defensive drills, it would all relate back to things I've seen other people do, right? There's a really great Towson drill where you're back to back and you got to spin around and then do your one-on-one. There was a really good one from Farmingdale the other day that I was tagged in. It was basically a run the rail style drill, basically a short 1v1 where there were two buckets that you could go to. So you could either go up and you could inside roll, or you could go all the way up and you could just like turn the corner and dunk it. But so there's all kinds of drills like that. You just kind of got to look for them. The key is to know who has the best, like really good drills. But if you're looking for individual defensive drills, I recommend make sure you work on your stick. Make sure that you're working on your athleticism. All of the most athletic lacrosse players are, for the most part, defensemen. But unless, they're also attackmen too, actually. But you have to be an extremely athletic player to be a defenseman. You also have to be a very smart player, because defense is way harder than offense, in my opinion. You're just always active. There's no time to take off, which good offense is the same, but you can get away with not being active on the offensive end a lot better than you can on the defensive end. And you'll definitely see that in our new video that's going to be coming out here soon. All right. Any other questions? Let me know, and then we will get... We'll get off and we'll enjoy the rest of this Wednesday. Cool. We already did the announcements, but thank you guys for watching. Hopefully the video isn't completely spacey and terrible on YouTube. I should probably figure out exactly why things aren't working as well as they could, and we should be good to go. But so appreciate you guys watching. If you guys need anything, definitely hit me up on anything, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Hit me up on any of those, and have a good one. I'll see you guys next week. Later. Bye, YouTube.